The courtroom smelled faintly of oiled wood and old paper, like every courtroom Karoline Leavitt had ever stood in. But this one felt different. The tension didn't hang in the air. It clung thick, heavy, as if everyone in the room knew something was about to happen, but couldn't say what. Karoline stood just inside the large mahogany doors of the 9th District Civil Courthouse, taking in the surroundings before stepping forward with purpose. Her sharp black blazer was tailored to precision, and beneath it, just visible against her white blouse, hung a small silver cross. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't oversized, just simple, elegant, hers. She walked calmly toward the plaintiff's table, setting down her briefcase and nodding politely at the opposing counsel, who offered a half-hearted smile. He knew who she was. Most people did now. She wasn't just another attorney. She had made waves across the country defending conservative causes others were too afraid to touch. To some, she was a rising star. To others, a threat. The bailiff announced the court's commencement as Judge Raymond Ellison entered the room. Everyone rose. Judge Ellison was known for being a man of rigidity. Mid-60s, sharp features, no nonsense. Some said he had a brilliant legal mind. Others whispered that he let his biases sit too close to the bench. Karoline had studied his record. She knew he didn't care for grandstanding, but she also knew something else. He had ruled against more religious liberty cases than he had supported, and now she could feel his gaze settle on her. As they sat and began opening statements, Karoline could already sense something was off. Ellison's eyes kept drifting toward her neck, not just occasionally, repeatedly, measuring, calculating. 10 minutes in, as Karoline was referencing a prior ruling in her argument, Judge Ellison raised a hand. "Miss Leavitt," he said flatly, "approach the bench." She paused mid-sentence, confused. Still, she composed herself and walked forward. As she stood before him, the judge leaned down slightly, lowering his voice just enough for everyone to hear, but laced with irritation. "I will remind you that courtroom attire must remain strictly neutral and professional," he said. "That cross around your neck is in direct violation of that principle." Karoline blinked, caught slightly off guard. "Your Honor, with all due respect, this is a small personal religious symbol. I've worn it in courtrooms across the country, and it has never been an issue." Ellison's lips thinned. "This is my courtroom, Miss Leavitt, and I will not allow any visible symbols, religious or political, that may influence perception." "With further respect," she replied carefully, "I believe the Constitution protects my right to wear a religious symbol in a public space, especially one where I serve as counsel." "I'm not here to debate the Constitution with you," he snapped. "I'm telling you, remove it or face a contempt fine." There was a pause, a long, loaded silence. People in the gallery whispered. Even the opposing attorney shifted uneasily. Karoline didn't flinch. "I will not remove it, Your Honor," she said, voice calm but ironclad. "If you believe a cross on my neck affects my ability to uphold the law, you're welcome to fine me." The judge narrowed his eyes. "Very well, $500. Recorded." He struck the gavel sharply once. The bang echoed louder than it needed to, as if meant to punish her audibly. Karoline turned without a word and walked back to her table. The courtroom was quiet. Everyone was watching her. She didn't meet any of their eyes. She simply opened her folder, flipped to the next tab, and continued. The air had shifted, but not in the way Judge Ellison had hoped. For the next 2 hours, Karoline owned the room. Every motion she filed was precise. Every precedent she cited was airtight. She anticipated objections before they were made. At one point, the judge interrupted her, raising a concern about a procedural technicality. Without hesitation, she pulled a highlighted ruling from her folder, walked it up to the bench, and laid it in front of him. It was the exact case, same district, nearly identical facts. The judge scanned the ruling, silent for a long moment. Karoline stood there, silent, letting the power of her preparation speak for itself. Ellison grunted, noted, proceed. By the third hour, even the opposing counsel had started stumbling. He struggled to respond to her arguments. The gallery was still. No more whispering, no more murmuring. People were watching Karoline differently now, not as a troublemaker with a cross, but as a force of nature in the courtroom. Judge Ellison avoided eye contact with her for most of the afternoon. His tone grew quieter, less aggressive. The turning point came during the cross-examination of a key witness. The defense had relied heavily on a procedural loophole to avoid liability, but Karoline's questioning laid bare the contradictions in their argument. Her voice never rose, she never flinched, but her words cut with surgical precision. "Would you agree," she said to the witness, "that willfully ignoring internal compliance standards, even after being warned, would constitute negligence under your own company's guidelines?" The witness froze. The opposing counsel objected. "Overruled." "Yes," the witness muttered. Karoline nodded. "Thank you. No further questions." Even Judge Ellison seemed slightly stunned. As the session adjourned for the day, Ellison gathered his papers slowly, lingering on the bench longer than necessary. Karoline remained seated, calmly organizing her notes. Then something strange happened. Ellison cleared his throat. "Miss Leavitt," he said, his voice lacking its earlier sharpness, "court resumes at 9 a.m. I expect both parties to be ready." "Yes, Your Honor," she replied politely. He hesitated just a second too long, then added, "You're well prepared." A flicker of a smile crossed her lips. "Thank you, Your Honor." He gave a short nod, then turned and disappeared through the door behind the bench. As the courtroom emptied, one of the young law clerks leaned toward Karoline as she packed up her briefcase. "I've never seen him back down like that," he whispered. Karoline looked up at him, expression unreadable. "I didn't ask him to back down," she said. "I just did my job." She walked out of the courtroom the same way she entered it, confident, calm, and still wearing the small silver cross around her neck. She had been fined for it, silently rebuked, publicly challenged, but she hadn't needed to argue about faith. Her skill had done the talking. And deep down, Judge Ellison knew he had tried to put her in her place, and instead had to reckon with her brilliance. The next morning, the courtroom was already buzzing when Karoline Leavitt arrived. The fine she'd been given the day before had made its way through legal circles overnight. Clerks were whispering. Attorneys at nearby benches exchanged glances as she passed. She heard her name mentioned more than once, soft, urgent tones behind cupped hands, but she didn't break stride. Her pace was calm, deliberate, heels tapping against the floor like punctuation to her quiet defiance. The cross was still around her neck, unmoved, unbothered, imperfectly visible. When she walked through the double doors of courtroom 4B, she did so with the same composure she had carried the day before. But something was different. The court staff, those who had mostly avoided eye contact yesterday, nodded as she passed. The gallery was more full than usual. Law students had filed in. Even a few members of the press were seated near the back. Subtle cameras, hidden behind tinted glasses and notepads. They'd all come expecting something, a fight, a reprimand, a woman put in her place. But Karoline had already flipped that narrative. She took her seat. The opposing counsel barely looked up this time. He'd been embarrassed, cornered by someone half his age and twice his sharpness. At exactly 9 a.m., Judge Ellison emerged again from behind the curtain. Everyone rose. Karoline met his eyes for a single second. He hesitated before sitting down. That 1 second, it said everything. "Be seated," he said quickly. Today he didn't bother glancing at her necklace. Today there was no mention of the cross. They resumed testimony. The defense tried to regain their footing, introducing a string of procedural objections. Karoline countered each one without so much as raising her voice. At times, it seemed like she was barely trying. Her confidence had a way of making things feel effortless, but everyone in the room knew how much work it took to make something look that easy. The witness they brought to the stand fumbled more than once under her questioning. At one point, Karoline placed a document on the projector, slowly highlighting a section with her laser pointer. "Could you please explain," she said, calm and razor-sharp, "why this line from your own compliance report contradicts your testimony from just 5 minutes ago?" The witness stammered. The defense attorney objected again. "Overruled," Judge Ellison said quickly. Again, that slight hesitation. He knew she had him boxed in. The morning passed with Karoline clearly in command, but it was during the lunch recess that everything shifted. Karoline remained in the courtroom, reviewing notes, when a low voice caught her attention. "Miss Leavitt." She looked up. Judge Ellison was standing near the bench, robe loosened, papers in his hand. She stood instinctively. "Your Honor." He didn't approach, but he didn't walk away either. "I reviewed your brief again this morning." She waited. "There's a clarity I